Hello and welcome to the Great Telco Debate 2020 and our fourth topic for this year's event. Sustainability as a business reality, not just a CSR tick box exercise. Well, returning for the seventh outing of the annual Great Telco Debate are Chris Lewis and Graham Wilde. Welcome again, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello again.
Now, in a moment, we'll introduce our special industry guests, our expert witnesses who will give their views on the topic, and then we'll present our motion. And it's this motion that we want you to vote on, either for the motion or against the motion. And Chris and Graham will do some last-minute campaigning to support their views. Chris, what's the premise behind today's subject?
Well, Guy, sustainability has always been there, as the opening title suggests, but it's been kept in the Corporate Social Responsibility Office and has never really become part of the way it shapes the business as a whole. Over the last few years, certainly, we've seen a lot more activity, whether it's around the energy side of the industry, green investment, diversity, inclusion, and it's becoming much more of an issue. So we wanted to put a debate out there to get as many perspectives as possible to see where we are on this sustainability journey and how it shapes the industry going forward.
Thank you, Chris, for setting the scene for us. Time now to introduce our industry guests who will be providing their expert witness statements. And I would like to welcome Helen Lamprell, General Counsel and Director of External Affairs for Vodafone. Mansoor Hanif, Executive Director, Technology and Digital Infrastructure at NEOM. Gema Esteban Garrido, ESG Investors and Non-Financial Reporting Director for Telefónica. Gabrielle Guinea, Head of Environmental Sustainability at BT Group, and George Power, Senior Vice President with Macquarie Group. Hello everybody and welcome to the Great Telco Debate 2020. Chris, over to you for our expert witness statements.
Thank you, Guy, and I'm delighted to have such a great roster of witnesses with us today to dig into this topic of sustainability, as we're becoming increasingly aware it's a multi-dimensional, multi-layered issue that we need to look at from all sorts of perspectives. So without any further delay, let's move into our witnesses. Helen from Vodafone, could you please share with us your perspective on how sustainability fits in with the Vodafone view of the world?
I think for us at Vodafone, as for many on this call, we can acknowledge that our core purpose is connectivity. And during COVID, it became apparent that this core purpose had been taken for granted by many, but was in fact completely crucial. And so we were able to take that core purpose and really amplify it during the recent crisis. And that's the simple thinking behind what we do on many sustainability initiatives. Just recently, we launched a programme to deliver free connectivity to 250,000 school children who don't have it, a problem that was very apparent to those in the education sector, but hidden from general view. Most people have been worrying about children spending too much time on screens, rather than thinking about those who don't have enough access to it. Why do we help school children? Well, simply because we can. They need connectivity, and that's what we do. But also because as a company, from our CEO down, we believe in the mantra of no person left behind, and we get really excited about doing our part to deliver on that. We also launched a plan for those who've recently lost their jobs. We made an unlimited plan as cheap as we possibly could, £10, no contract or credit check, so that people did not have to lose connection when they've already lost so much. All they had to do was to demonstrate that they were in receipt of job seekers allowance, universal credit, whatever the right criteria was. Because honestly, how do you find a new job without a phone? So when we're looking at sustainability, we're saying we take what we do as our core purpose and we use it for good. Another maybe slightly frivolous example, but last summer when the lockdown was easing, there were many people still in care homes. So we had a lot of fun with Catherine Jenkins organising a sing-along. It sounds trivial, but the number of people who dialed in from the UK and around the world really showed actually how much it mattered. It's powered by connectivity, connecting people who could not be physically with those who they love. And there's lots more, like the free unlimited data offers that we and some of our competitors gave to NHS staff and care workers, the work we've done with Bernardes and Safe Lives to get unused devices out of drawers, and into the hands of those who need them most. And underpinning this, there are also the things that we do for our employees, core things we do for our employees. So starting on the 1st of March, we're updating our paternity leave policy to offer 16 weeks paid leave, because we won't have equality until men can take more of the burden of childcare. There's some very practical things we're doing with our supply chain as well. During the first COVID lockdown, we changed our payment terms, so we were paying our small suppliers on 15 days because cash flow is extraordinarily important, and we adhere to the prompt payment code. We also use 20% of our selection criteria for our suppliers based on their commitments to diversity and the environment, because as incredibly large procurement organisations, if we don't take responsibility for the companies we're paying, then we don't have as much impact as we can do. What are the benefits to us as a business, to our shareholders? There is, of course, that very pragmatic side to sustainability, tangible corporate benefits. Clean and green technologies help us reduce our carbon footprint, but they also lower our energy consumption and have a positive impact on OPEX. Energy bills are rather large for telcos. Recruitment, crucial, younger generation, much more socially conscious. Perhaps people always were, but you can really see that now. You need to demonstrate that you're a good corporate citizen. And our customers really care. We can see when we go out with these offers, the Voxy for Now proposition, the schools.connected proposition, our customers really like it. It matters to them that we're trying to use our core product for good. I believe we're at a turning point in our industry where regulators need to understand that in order for this industry to thrive, in order for us to keep up with the constant growth in data, we need an end to the constant downward pressure on prices from regulators, which has created a poor cycle of investment performance. But crucial to that contract with the regulator, we need to demonstrate we are responsible businesses who care for our customers and the wider society we're part of. So we believe that technology can be a force for good. We believe that we can deliver impactful projects. Our customers like it. Our employees are happy. And I believe that it makes us a stronger, better business, which should ultimately make our shareholders happy.
Thank you very much, Helen. And certainly that notion of sustainability and responsibility certainly come through in many of the discussions that I've had as we've been leading up towards this debate. I'd now like to move on to Mansoor, and with a very different approach where for many of the people presenting their witness perspectives today, this is something which is being fitted into a former structure in many ways. So Mansoor, down there in the desert, beginning to build this new country effectively. Can you talk to us about how sustainability fits into the NEOM project, and perhaps talk a bit about the NEOM project as well?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. I have to admit, we are not a telco or a great telco, but we're up for a debate. And you might ask, what is NEOM? And effectively, we are an accelerator for human progress, which is a huge ambition. And that goes across all human domains where progress is required, and that's pretty much everything. But I think it's important to recognize that sustainability is absolutely key in that. And if you look at the three key pillars of how we see we can accelerate human progress here in NEOM, is by creating this new future environment where we have exceptional livability and a new approach to reinvent conservation and the environment, but also to develop thriving businesses across all sectors. And all of that is underpinned by technology, because we have a digital first approach where we're building the digital models of the whole of society before we do the physical. And I think if you think about those three pillars, it becomes clear how we consider sustainability as very much being an imperative rather than any kind of tick box exercise, especially if you look at reinventing conservation with sustainability at the center of that, and at the same time creating thriving businesses. What that means is that it is good business sense to focus on those key ideals, and we believe we can manage all of that in a coherent way. And in our vision, the way we believe we can achieve all of those pillars together in a coherent way is through what we call the model of regenerative development. So we are pushing out a completely new infrastructure, completely new cities, in a way that we completely respect the environment. And to do that, we are focusing on what we call a new value chain, a new chain of values, where the traditional values of investment, input and output, revenues, outcomes, they're still important. And we believe they will always be important. But they're not the only ones. We've added to that the use of resources in and out. And of course, that is the fundamentals of sustainability, making sure that the resources are used efficiently. And also the environment, making sure that the environment in which we build is maintained and conserved and enhanced. But also beyond that, we've added in new values, which are the livability and the resiliency of society to respond to shocks. And I think we can all agree that this year, with the impact of COVID, it's been a tremendous shock to the whole of global society. And the great news is that we all know that we will recover from this, and the signs of that with the vaccines appearing soon is very positive. But we should recognize that COVID has left what I see as a kind of a scar on global society that we will heal from, but it's not going to go away. And what that means is we will always remember, and we will be changed forever. So I believe that at the beginning of this year, when I joined NEOM, we felt that we were really powering ahead of global society, and we would need to push really hard to lead the way to show a template. But now we see that actually the impact of COVID has been such that we believe that many societies, if not all societies around the world, see those mixes of values as the new value chain that we should all be aiming at. So it's becoming much more mainstream. I would just mention that I also believe that technology and telecoms in particular has a fundamental role in the future of digital sustainability. And I think it should be the digital world that's driving that sustainability. And if you think about the way that networks are becoming cloud native, that's freeing up networks to be much more flexible and to manage that new set of values that are coming out there. At the same time, the large cloud infrastructure for data centers around the world is becoming more local because everybody knows that it's not sustainable to send large amounts of data all over the world. And so therefore there's a convergence aspect where I think telecoms have got everything to play for.
Thank you very much, Mansoor. I think I'm sure we'll come back to many of the issues that you've raised in those opening comments. Thank you very much. Gema, from a Telefónica point of view, I think you've been in perhaps a slightly different position. So please share your perspective on sustainability from the Telefónica perspective.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much, Chris, for inviting me to this fantastic event. I know you for many years now. I have always loved your intelligent and challenging view of this sector. So I'm so happy to discuss with you, all the panelists, this very interesting topic of ESG, which you all know that it stands for environmental, social, and governance, or sustainability issues on our telco sector. No? And let me start with a little bit of aggressive opinion here. No? I have no doubt that ESG and sustainability linked to the core strategy of any company or any sector is the right thing to do. And this is just because I think the world is changing very, very quickly. New generations, among which our customers, but also our investors, are claiming for a new way to think on business away from just pure financial results. And let me clarify a little bit more with some maybe controversial questions to tackle on this. No? For example, should we as an industry be worried about the CapEx for 5G deployment or about how our customers are going to use 5G? Should we be worried about how to squeeze our supply chain in order to desperately maintain our margins and be more and more efficient, or build up partnerships with them so that we can innovate and create value for the end customer? Should we be worried about new revenue sources, or rather try to increase our customer satisfaction and our reputation in the markets where we operate? How are we preserving the data privacy of our customers? Is this a priority as it is for our customers increasingly? Is the telco industry at the end of the day hated or loved? No? And if it is the first one, how can we improve or transform this perception. No? I think very strongly that sustainability should be about all these questions and many more, which are really linked to our core business and therefore our P&L, our valuation, and our impact in society as a whole, as my previous colleagues has very well commented. No? I also think that we need to really work more in order to really embed this into the mindset of the boards, of our top management, and maybe some regulators, although their ESG regulation push in Europe is huge, I would say. And maybe we need to rethink the old sustainability and our CSR department, if this is still valid, which is the role of strategy on this, how we should build up our strategic planning, taking into account this and taking into account long-term rather than short-term. How can we allocate our resources? So there are a lot of questions that I think that we need to ask ourselves and that need to change in order to embrace this from a real point of view. No?
Thank you, Gema. Very, very comprehensive view, and obviously a lot of thought got into that. Thank you very much. Gabrielle, welcome. And from your perspective within your role within BT, can you perhaps share your thoughts with us on how sustainability from your particular view within BT is looking?
Yes, I wanted to start by just setting a bit of background. BT has been on a climate action journey for over 28 years now. We set our first carbon reduction target already back in 1992. And in 2008, we set our first science-based target. And this is, of course, before people were talking about linking science to climate targets. That target was to reduce the carbon emissions intensity of our business by 80% by 2020. We actually met that target 4 years ahead of time in 2016. So we decided to be even more ambitious and set a new science-based target aligned with a 1.5 degree pathway. When we announced that target, we were the third company in the world to set such a target. That means that we're now going to go even further and reduce the carbon emissions intensity of our business by another 87%. By 2030-31, and that of our supply chain by 42%, and be a net zero business in 2045. And so how are we doing in terms of progress against those targets? Actually, since 2016-17, we've reduced our operational carbon emissions by 42%, and that of our supply chain by 8%. And we reached a new milestone actually a few weeks ago. We're now sourcing 100% renewable electricity worldwide. So if we look also beyond our own operations and look at our customers, last year we helped our customers save 13 million tons of carbon emissions, and we do that through services like video conferencing or vehicle telematics. In June of this year, we launched 2 new initiatives in support of a green recovery. The first one is the Green Tech Innovation Platform. We've joined up with a Plug and Play to look for scale-up companies that we can partner with to develop new solutions to help, in particular, public sector customers to reach net zero. The second initiative is the UK Electric Fleets Coalition. We joined up with the Climate Group because BT and Openreach have the UK's second largest fleet. We have over 33,000 vehicles, and we wanted to advocate for a more favourable policy environment for the introduction of EVs in the UK. And actually that coalition now has 29 members who manage over 500,000 vans and cars on UK roads. So we were, of course, absolutely delighted with the government and the Prime Minister's announcement to bring forward the ban of sale of petrol and diesel vehicles to 2030. And I think that's just a great example of how governments, businesses, and society need to work together to towards a low carbon economy. And so in summary, I think collaboration and partnerships are so important, which is why working in sustainability is so interesting.
Thank you very much indeed, Gabrielle. It certainly is. It is interesting and multidimensional, I think, is what we're beginning to understand from here. And George, last of our witnesses to run through, but certainly not least, please share your perspective from the Macquarie point of view.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It's great to be here and sharing views with the panelists today. Just a quick word on who Macquarie Bank is. So we are a global financial services group. And we have a lot of expertise in sustainability and in green finance. In fact, our CEO is one of the founding members of the Climate Finance Leadership Initiative, which was set up by Bloomberg. My specific role is very much in the telecoms vertical. And specifically, I'm looking at smartphone financing and how the industry can be using a more circular business model to address some of the sustainability challenges and help operators generally. So my perspective is perhaps a bit more prosaic, but very much about smartphones and thinking about how we can engage with customers on the topic of sustainability with that object that they have in their pocket. The opportunity, we think, comes from starts from the problem. The problem is the linear model, if you like, that customers have in terms of the use of their smartphones. If we start off in thinking about what the impact of a smartphone is, if you look at the total emissions from a smartphone through its life, it's equivalent to about 100 kilograms of CO2, which is the same as driving a diesel car for almost 600 kilometers. And a lot of that is very much focused in the manufacturing phase. Another important impact, if you like, of smartphones is that it takes approximately 50 kilograms of raw materials to make a single smartphone. This then, and that's notwithstanding all of the issues with e-waste, which are becoming more and more prevalent and understood. So these problems are made more significant, though, by the fact that we only use our smartphones for, let's say, on average 3 years, at the end of which 45% of us will keep it spare and put it in the bottom drawer. So it's a problematic kind of linear use once and maybe never again model, which we think presents actually a lot of opportunity for operators who have their engagement machines, if you like, with customers. And so when we're thinking about what the industry is doing, from the outside, obviously we're not a telecoms operator. What we see is there are a lot of important steps being taken by some manufacturers. Apple has committed to carbon neutrality by 2030, but 2030 is 10 years away. They will have made another 2 billion iPhones in the meantime. So that's quite a lot of time and opportunity, we think, for operators to be active. What we see, at least from the outside, is there's a lot of focus in terms of emissions in the network. Back to my example of a phone costing 100 kilograms of CO2, actually the usage portion of that 100 kilograms is actually only about 30%. So there's a huge delta there, which still needs to be addressed. And the opportunity we see is that there are very few cases we see of operators putting sustainability really at the heart of their proposition to their end customers. It's obviously very important, and we see a lot in terms of investor pages, but very few examples of customer-facing propositions. And where they are, they're still quite small, not really mass market. I mean, trade-in could be an example when customers trade in their phones at the end of their contract. Those, in percentage terms, it's actually very, very small. So we think that's the big opportunity, and if anybody can influence the behavior of consumers, and to my understanding, really addressing sustainability is about changing customer behaviors. It feels to me that actually operators are in a fantastic place to do that.
So having been through the witness statements, it's evident that this is a multi-dimensional, multi-layered issue that perhaps people thought was just to do with energy or was just to do with climate, but actually it affects so many parts of the business. And Helen, if I might come back to you first, you mentioned your CEO and the way in which he's particularly getting involved in it. How do the discussions run at that board level? How often does sustainability or the related issues come up? And is it beginning to permeate into every aspect of what you're doing at Vodafone at the board level?
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting, actually. I think, if 3 or 4 years ago, I genuinely wouldn't say it was something that came up regularly. But actually, a lot of the things that we're doing now are coming directly from interventions from different members of the board. So sometimes I come up with ideas and say, look, there's a problem, I think we can fix it. But actually the inspiration behind the Voxy for Now prop, which is for the people who are unemployed, was very much Nick's, where he said, look, there's a whole bunch of people who, through no fault of their own, they've lost their jobs. These people need our support to stay, to reskill, to get into the job market. And so, absolutely that was from him, could we look at this, guys? And then the team picked it up, and actually it was my colleagues in the commercial business unit who picked it up and made it happen. So, was I there cheering in the background? Yeah, absolutely I was. But I love it when it's not me or my team who are coming up with these ideas, because that's when you really know that you've embedded purpose into your organisation, when you're seeing lots of other people coming up with it. So it's coming up a lot. Does it come up at every single board meeting? No, but it's coming up in other meetings where senior executives are present. So it's being driven outside of the board meetings as well. And I think that's actually even more important, because if you're getting it coming top down and bottom up, that's when you're in a really good space.
The other thing which resonated with me was certainly this notion of getting people connected. I think as an industry, those are industry insiders like ourselves, we tend to assume that most people have an iPhone or a smartphone and multiple broadband connections. But actually, the unconnected is an enormous proportion, even within the so-called mature Western market. So yeah, I would certainly agree. I think that getting the rest of the people connected, that responsibility to bring people into the digital community is extremely important. So yeah, delighted to hear that. Mansoor, if I might come back to you, you are in I'd say a very privileged position in the way you're being able to play with this technology. Can you talk about how the telecoms piece fits in, the way in which telecoms is fitted as part of the underlying infrastructure? I mean, we steer away often from calling it a utility, but the way in which the telecoms piece and the technology piece fits into what you're building, is it just that? Is it a utility part of the infrastructure?
No, well, I don't think it is just a utility, but I think it's a fundamental enabler. And we are building the telecoms networks ahead of the infrastructure. So they'll be going into the ground and the air as the actual buildings are being built. But I think it's fundamental to understand when people talk about, you mentioned about digital hierarchy and where is the telecom space in that. But if you really think about it, digital transformation, which is a big buzzword over the last couple of years, really digital transformation is not just about digitizing everything one by one. It's really about making sure that those elements are interconnected. And without that, you cannot optimize resources. And without optimizing resources, you cannot be sustainable. So it's a fundamental bedrock of digital transformation. And if digital transformation is going to drive efficiencies and a better use of resources, then it's a fundamental bedrock of sustainability. So I think the debate is, what role will that bedrock have in the whole value chain? And that's what I mentioned earlier, that actually being able to have real-time knowledge and being able to predict where resources are needed across a whole range of cities, as we're going to have in NEOM, is the fundamental to actually optimizing those resources. So this is what we call the concept of digital sustainability, or cognitive cities, where we can use the connectivity and the data that's coming from that to build models of resource needs and movement across all of society. And with society's buy-in, where people are actually willing to be part of that value chain and perhaps not receive their Amazon package at the fastest possible moment, but to sign up to a sustainability charter where we can, for example, aggregate demand in a certain community block and then make sure that people get their parcels in a more sustainable way. That's just an example of how we can use data that's coming through the connectivity in a way that society actually buys into in terms of the value. So I think that's just an example, but I think that it's great what we're doing in terms of power. It's great what we're doing in terms of the cyclic economy and reusing smartphones, reusing laptops, etc. But I think we're underestimating the huge impact and power of what telecoms can do to enable all of the rest of society by using the services that are enabled through our connectivity.
I agree, and I think we discussed to a certain extent how one of the scenarios given the pandemic that actually by having all of these utilities and the infrastructure connected properly, we'll actually be in a position to even isolate where a disease might be spreading by putting sensors even into the sewers, which I think is something that I know they've looked at in Italy, and I know that would be something perhaps we would never have connected together before, but actually by having a more joined up set of thinking, actually we'll be able to build those things a lot closer in the future. So yeah, thank you very much indeed, Mansoor. Gema, you introduced this notion of the sort of responsibility and the financial side and in investment. And I know that's been very close to your early working in ESG. And George made a comment in his opening remarks about moving away from the financial reporting to the homepage. Can you talk to us a little bit about how ESG is perceived with your investors and the potential impact on the valuation of someone like Telefónica? Because I think that's been something you've been looking at.
For sure. Well, what we have seen is a lot of demand and a lot of, requests from investors, especially those that are embracing ESG and that are signing PRI and are publicly embracing what sustainability means and integrating these criteria into their investment decisions. I personally have had a lot of interaction with them during these last 2 years, and they are really interested on this. What I have to say is that telcos are kind of, especially when we talk about fixed income, so when you issue green bonds or this part of the investment world, we are very well received because we are different suspects to be joining that kind of world. And investors at the end of the day want to diversify and to look at different industries and different people. So I think there is a huge demand on that. And what we really need to do, and this is very much, I really agree with George has mentioned in his first speech, is that we really, and investors are willing to understand how you are really integrating this in your core business, in your decisions, in your strategy. So moving from a PowerPoint to the homepage, as George has said, I like that. And it is true that is what they are really trying to understand. Other thing that I would say that has happened in these last 2 years is that investors have understood very much which are the key issues on our industry, right? So we can talk about green, and green is okay, and we all need to be engaged and need to be need to comply with the Paris Agreement, with environmental goals, but obviously we are not the industry that has the big, push for reducing the CO2 emissions in our planet, right? Rather, there are other material issues or the materiality of our sector are different things, such as, for example, customer engagement or data privacy and security, things that are quite linked to our core business and that investors are more and more understanding that are the right things to ask. So I would say, Chris, that my last message here would be this is here for I mean, this is now is going to be among us from now and forever, and we need to really understand how to integrate in the strategy and get rid of any greenwashing or sustainability washing or something that is not damaging us rather than helping us to really have an impact. No.
Thank you very much indeed, Gema. Thank you. And Gabrielle, from your position within BT, obviously your title means you're looking more at the climate side. Two questions for you, really. One is around how you're organised within BT to address this, sort of similar to the question we dealt with Helen. And then secondly, this issue of reporting all of the different standards and all of the numbers that are thrown around about when we go carbon neutral. Do we need to have some more clearly defined international standards or agree frameworks on that? So you get two questions for the price of one, Gabrielle.
Thanks, Chris. Just on the first question then about sustainability and how it's part of the organization. So I think it's now part of the entire organization. I've been in this role for 11 years at BT. And I think just like Helen said, this has become so much more of a popular issue. I get asked about it all the time. We do have a digital impact and sustainability board where I present to regularly. I get questions from colleagues. I do a lot of team presentations. But one thing that has changed for us this year is that actually bonus targets are now linked to how well we're doing on our decarbonisation performance. And I would just say around targets, I think we've seen that targets have really driven change within BT and also externally in terms of sending these market signals that I talked around EVs. And I think targets are really important. So, which I guess brings me on to the whole reporting, being transparent, showing progress, talking about your challenges. For BT, we have three challenges in how we're going to get to net zero: renewables, our fleet, and how we're going to heat our buildings. And we're very open about these challenges, and that's why we try to get these groups together to collaborate, to try and change markets. And so initiatives like the Science Based Targets Initiative, RE100, EV100, etc., very important in driving progress. I think in terms of standards, yes, it's helpful to have common definitions. I think what sometimes happens is that we spend so much time looking for definitions and standards of things that we forget to actually do the work. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, we sometimes do lose sight of the goal. So, George, to come to you to close off from the sort of question and answer side, you talk about this particular aspect of the handsets, and you mentioned about recycling equipment, and certainly in my experience in the past, we have taken equipment that was in the center of the network and we've gradually migrated it to the edge, and then perhaps we then moved it out to other countries in different parts of the operations group. Do you see any limit to the sort of system you're putting in place, the sort of the circular economy for the mobile devices? Are you looking at more broadly at all the equipment that impacts and gets built into the telecoms networks?
I think what limits us, and what are the things, perhaps to slightly flip your question, what limits us and what is maybe holding us back, or what are the ingredients for success to really make this sort of circular model come to life? I think certainly, I kind of said before, I think having the right business model so that actually there's a good sort of economic incentive for customers, that's a real must-have. Having and actually also trust, I think, is a really important part of the formula, and that I think is where telecoms operators have an amazing opportunity, because these are companies who are interacting with millions and millions and millions of customers every day, and have these customer relationship machines to do that. I think also having alignment across the business, Then we were talking just before, Carol, I think, about targets, and I think making sure the targets are clearly kind of aligned across the business, and ideally having these sustainability targets, cascading right down into the P&L objectives, let's say, of the commercial owners. I mean, that I think would be fantastic, and data security is a really important piece as well, to actually make it, making sure customers know that their data is secure when they hand their phones back. But ultimately, I think it all comes back to engagement. It really is engagement, and in the operators, telecoms operators, really engaging with customers about the phones. It is the end of the network, if you like, that is in their phone. Engaging with them on the most tangible representation, perhaps, of what the network is for the individual customer, but also I think engaging those customers with the benefits that they're bringing. If you could build a sustainability proposition in the homepage that in some way links those individual customers to the benefits maybe that they're bringing to communities in developing countries, I think that's the way that you can really get end consumers excited, really on board, and actually thinking this isn't just about my smartphone.
Thank you very much indeed, George. Mansoor, did you want to comment on that?
Just to add to the question about limits on smartphones, etc. I think what we're seeing in looking at the circular economy side of technology is on the IT side and laptops and servers. We see a number of companies that are coming out with really competitive, compelling offers to repackage laptops to make them just like new, where you don't see any difference, and that's getting a lot of traction, and we're very interested in that. So it's getting a lot of traction there, and there I can see that we're far away from the limits. Smartphones are a very tricky one, because smartphones are highly personalized for many people, but also they're becoming much more and more complex, and especially with 5G smartphones, you've got a huge range of antennas around the edges of the smartphone. So it becomes really difficult to do the same thing for laptops for those reasons. Although you could consider that there could be a new design to smartphones where you can easily plug and play new chipsets, for example. That could be done, but it's much more complicated with smartphones for the reasons I mentioned. But the area that there's a lot of electronic waste is cables. Everybody knows cables, adapters, and there's been a number of campaigns over the last couple of years to get people to bring in their old cables. I think the industry could do a lot to working with the device manufacturers to actually work more on the universal adapters and move away from the individual ones for each device. And I think that would have a huge impact on actual waste itself in terms of sustainability.
Thank you, Mansoor. Yes, I think what is interesting when we start to get the investment community looking more closely at our industry from a sustainability point of view is that there is value creation in what was perhaps waste in the past. I guess the other perhaps interesting question I'm sure we'll come on to discuss during the debate is are the operators willing to give up some revenue in the face of having better sustainability profile? And I think that's something which we may well see. Perhaps we encourage people not to renew their phones quite so often. I suspect not. But also, yes, using the resources, as I think you mentioned, Mansoor, in part of your comment, and making sure we're using resources responsibly, and then when we're not using them, actually moving them into a different part of industry or the economy and so on. I think with that, I'll draw this part of the witness statements and the Q&A to a conclusion and hand back to Guy.
Thank you very much, Chris, and also to all of our experts. As ever, a great range of views and ideas expressed there. Right, you've been presented with the facts, and now we want you to participate. You may have your own questions for our witnesses. If so, send them in and we'll incorporate them in our live show on Wednesday, December the 9th at 10 a.m. UK time. And get ready to vote, because here comes our motion.
And the motion is, the sustainability journey will have a major structural impact on the telecoms industry.
So there you have it. That's our motion. And Chris and Graham have tossed the great telco debate celebrity coin to see who's going to speak for and against the motion. And Graham, I see that you have the honour of speaking first and presenting your views for the motion.
Yes, I do, Guy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to vote for the motion. So I think sustainability, as Chris mentioned in the introduction, has gone from something that's kind of a backroom occupation at the side of the desk, if you like, to something that's absolutely front and centre for the telecoms industry. And very much like digitization or automation, the telecoms industry has enabled sustainable practices in other industries. But at the same time, it's being changed by those very practices itself. And we're seeing already that the power consumption of technology, for example, is a major issue in the procurement process for telecom operators. And also, many of the innovations that have come to us from deployments in the developing world, so for example, the use of solar power to power individual assets, are now being used in major economies as well. So I do think that this is really radically changing the way that DSPs are going about their business, and I would urge you to vote for the motion.
Thank you, Graham. So now it's Chris's turn to present his views as to why we should vote against the motion.
Thank you, Guy, and thank you indeed, Graham. Sustainability, lumping all of these issues together, in many ways underplays the importance of the individual elements involved. Bringing this all together to say it will shape the industry itself, I think is overstating. Yes, it's part of everything that we do, but at the end of the day, the industry has to be economically viable, and responding to the increased investments, the increased deployment of fibre, of radio towers and so on, actually is looking to create, of course, a profitable business for the telcos. Sustainability is part of that, but actually generating the right services for the industry in the short term is the issue in my mind. So I encourage you to vote against the motion, because whilst in the long term it may be the issue, in the short term we just need to get the telecoms infrastructure and services right. And I suspect that in many of the boardrooms where this is discussed, that the sustainability issue, whilst being aired, is superseded by the issue of getting the business right for the future.
Thank you, Chris. So we have our motion and we have our compelling arguments both for and against. But what do you, our audience, think? Are you for or against? Have your views been influenced by any of our expert witnesses, or have Chris and Graham's last minute please changed your mind? Vote now. There are green and red buttons below this video, for and against. Just click the one that matches your choice. And next to that is an area for you to submit your questions for our live show, when we will continue the debate and then reveal the final motion results. Thank you to all our guests for taking part today. Very much appreciated, and I know we're going to see most of you again during our live show. Don't forget, there will be 6 debates and 6 corresponding motions. Catch them all and then come and join us for our live end-of-year Great Telco Debate. Goodbye for now.